this gives chick flick a whole nother meaning. So let's talk about it. Is Babygirl the ultimate date night movie, or should you swipe left on that one? In this episode, I break down the spicy yet awkward dynamics of this romantic drama, the CEO hustle versus corporate monotony. Nicole Kidman plays this incredible woman who has it all. She's got the CEO of the company. She's got the perfect marriage. She's got the great house, all the money, the good kids, but she's trapped in a prison of her own creating. And so Babygirl explores surrendering to vulnerability, which you know I'm all about, the vulnerability. This movie covers everything from the trauma of being in a cult to queer culture. This dives deep. And so do I. So let's talk about novelty, danger, and why asking for what you want can feel so terrifying. Cheat code, but rewarding. As a therapist, I will say that I am sex positive, and I've worked with a lot of clients who are in all kinds of relationships, poly, open, BDSM, and I think that it is an important thing to explore, and I think that's partly why this movie is getting such press. So let's get into it a little bit on my takeaways. So the first one is the complexity of power dynamics. I was thinking if the roles were reversed and it was an older dude sleeping with a young woman intern, I feel like that has obviously been played out and would have come off as a very different tone. I think what was really cool about this movie was it was a feminist retelling of it. And really, the obviously, boss intern is not an acceptable form of relationship, but is there a world in which, because she's a woman and typically men have more power in a patriarchal society, that equals out some of the power dynamics? I'm not saying it does. I'm just saying these are like interesting questions to ask. So I think that she has a power up position being the CEO, being married, but then she has the power down position of being a woman. He has a power up position of being a man, and he has a power down position of being an intern. So does that cancel out some of the power dynamics? It definitely adds complexity and nuance to it. And so I think that any good piece of film or media, it sort of leaves more questions than answers. But yes, I do think when you think about marginalized identities, the more of those you have, it compounds the tendency to have oppression or sort of power dynamics skewed against you. But it's really interesting. Not often do we look at, most of us have some positions where we're power up and some positions where we're power down. For example, I'm a white woman. So being white comes with more power historically in our society, versus being a woman often comes with more oppression, more chance of violence, that sort of thing. And so often we can have a majority identity and a marginalized identity. So it's interesting to see this movie really flips the script on the power. And is Romy in the film acting in a predatory nature based on the power of her position? Or is that even possible because she's in the power down position of a woman? In the same aspect, he's the dominant in the sort of dominant submissive interaction. So does he really hold the power? Or sometimes people tell me that the submissive has the power because they can end the interaction with a safety word. So it's interesting to kind of think about. It's really complex. And I mean, I can just say from my personal experience, if the genders were flipped in this movie, it would not have had the appeal that it does. And I think maybe it would have been problematic. I think it, again, brings up more questions than answers. But just to say, there's complex power dynamics. I know when I was in grad school, several of the professors married their students, and then that was just what it was. And if they go on to have a happy marriage, is that an acceptable relationship? I don't know. I think there's nuances and complexity there. Okay, takeaway number 2, a feminist retelling of the sub-dom relationship. So, a lot of my coaching experience has been with sex and relationship coaches. That's the pleasure emphasis of pleasure psychology, really merging the two. I think I can say as a feminist that I've been a little averse to anything that plays out sort of a patriarchal undertone in the bedroom. I want to feel fully liberated in my power, in my voice. And yet, sometimes sex just doesn't work like that. Sometimes what you like in the bedroom is the opposite of what you want in the real world. I don't know why that's a thing, but obviously within the kink and fetish community, we know that people are into all kinds of things, right? And so this feminist retelling, I think, Nicole Kidman's acting is incredible. She, I think, is the only one who really could have carried the vibe the way it was portrayed. And, a woman director really centered her as the subject. One thing I want to talk about real quick is objectification theory. This is a theory in psychology that says the more that we're objectified through toxic media, harassment, rape, abuse, violence, it's all on a spectrum, right? And the more exposure that we get to that, the more we start to self objectify, dismiss our own feelings. If we get treated like our feelings don't matter, we start to learn that our feelings don't matter. And objectification is associated with almost every mental health issue under the sun: anxiety, depression, cognitive distortions, all of the things. And so I think it's one of those things that is really important to contextualize how mental health is related to oppressive forces in our society. And so mental health is not just your neurotransmitters. We really need to look at the context of the issue. I had a professor in grad school tell me that if there's a river and there's babies floating on the river and you jump in and save one baby and then there comes another baby and you save it, that it's really important to look down the river and see who's throwing all those babies in. Low-key, I had that as an anxiety dream just recently where there are all these little baby dolls floating in the river. But that's an aside. We can psychoanalyze that later. But I think it is really interesting to have, even though some of the things that she's being asked to do, get on her knees or drink this glass of milk, are somewhat objectifying, with the way that it's done from her point of view, and that she actually is into it and wants to do these things and they are thrilling to her.
Say it again.
I'll do whatever you tell me to do.
Good girl.
It's sort of like the old CEO joke that, they make decisions all day long. And so they kind of like mom mode too, right? We just like at the end, we have decision fatigue and we just want the decisions made for us. And I think there's something that can be emasculating about a powerful woman. I don't think it has to be, but certainly wanting to reverse the role there. And instead of being in charge of everyone, having someone in charge of her. So I will just say it bent my, again, introducing complexity, nuance into the discussion really helped to take a look at what's traditionally more a fringe sort of thing and brought it into the mainstream and really started opening up the discussions about the complexities and the power dynamics. And is it okay to want something in your sex life that maybe you wouldn't want in your regular life, and vice versa? Okay, the next key takeaway, I gotta say, this was super validating because CEO vibes, the limiting nature of corporate life. Oh my gosh. Wow, being a corporate CEO, they really hit on the robotic nature of her life as CEO. And she works in sort of an Amazon-like factory where they're doing robotic automation. And this is all really sort of the visual to what's going on in the inside, where she's just work. I think she's drinking like 7 cups of coffee, which he says you shouldn't drink that much coffee, which I gotta say, I felt called out by that. I'm not quite to 7, but too much still. But yeah, basically it never, just watching this made me so grateful that I didn't go the corporate mainstream version and then I became an entrepreneur, because I think being a CEO woman entrepreneur, you really get to call the shots and not in this like robotic corporate infrastructure. So anyway, it just made me thank my lucky stars, because it really did sort of show the dismal, life draining vibes that can be, part of corporate life. And for those of you out there, this channel's for anxious mompreneurs. But if any of y'all are doing the working mom life, where you work in corporate or wherever you work and then come home and be a mom on top of it. Like, such a tall order. Oh my God. Hats off to you. I don't know how you do it. Just being a mom is exhausting, and then to add corporate life to it. Talk about being in a box, right? Key takeaway number 4 is satisfaction is a practice. This is part of my own story of, being in grad school for 12 years and becoming a PhD and getting married and buying a house all by 30, just like box, 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 box. We check the boxes, right? I thought this was going to be some fulfilling, amazing thing. And it was. And if you don't slow down enough and complete that stress cycle, it's just never enough, and you just go on to the next hoop that you jump through or the next achievement, and it's just such a overachiever trap. And I think on the outside it looks like she has the perfect life, but on the inside she's feeling like quite lonely and quite angsty, and this affair really unlocks an intentional invitation to satisfy her more, let's say, kinky desires. And the way that I got myself out of the overachiever trap, hello, Enneagram 3, shout out. What's your Enneagram, if you know, down in the comments? But I'm the 3, which is the overachiever. And it's basically like trying to earn love, trying to be good enough, trying to prove your worth, right? Which is maybe what I'm doing in my YouTube videos when I'm like, hey guys. So I'm trying to tone it down a little bit, be like, the peaceful, real Megan, not that weird thing that happens when you turn on the camera. But anyway, that's sort of the basis of pleasure psychology, which is that we need to cultivate satisfaction. And so we need to complete the cycle. So when I'm done with a client, I'm like, woo, that was a great session. I'm done with that client. I'm done with my taxes. I'm like, oh my God, amazing. Almost done. Almost. Can't wait to get that off my plate. Mompreneur problems, am I right? But really completing the cycle, validating yourself, celebrating. We don't have to just celebrate the wins. We can also celebrate the I got through a really hard moment sort of celebrations. So I want to just say that if you are a high achieving woman who's not feeling as satisfied as she could be, not only is practicing satisfaction in your life super helpful, but hopefully we're practicing satisfaction in the bedroom as well, which kind of is a great tie-in to key takeaway number 5, which is the vulnerability of asking for what you want. And so they do a great job sort of edging this theme in the movie. There's this great scene where he tells her to get on her knees and she's like, what? Why? No, like, why would I do that? And he's like, I mean, like, is that what you want? And he kind of shows this, like, his youth and but also a little bit of his authority in it, and then like she does. And so I think that's an example of the movie actually opens with her asking for something sexually in bed with her husband, and it comes out that she's never had an orgasm, which, let me just address that. That's way more common than you would think. That's something that I have often helped women discover how ways to make that happen, either solo or with their partner. And I think that is, the vulnerable thing is asking for what you need. And it could be like asking, for someone to watch your kid. It could be asking for something that's going to give you an orgasm, right? Like, we sort of have the minutia example and then we have the more edgy example, right? But there's something so intense about asking for what you want. I think it's sort of a preemptive rejection, abandonment defense, where if we don't ask, we won't get denied. But here's the thing, if you don't ask, you also won't get what you want. I think in a safe, healthy relationship should be able to explore, the fantasies, that kind of thing, especially like women-driven fantasies, right? Because I think often the rhetoric is more about, look at a Cosmo magazine, right? It's all about fulfilling your man's sexual fantasies. Like, but what about us? What about our satisfaction? What about asking for what we want? And that's what makes this such an amazing movie. So a date night movie, if your man is really secure, then I would say go for it. I think it might lead to some great sex afterwards. And also not just the edgy parts, but also one of the things I loved about the movie is like you can tell that in these interactions that it's not objectifying, that he really cares about her and she cares about him, and that there's like a respect and a tenderness and an intimacy that's in there. And that's often what people tell me with the BDSM piece of it, is that it's really the aftercare and the bonding afterwards that is sometimes the more magical part of it. So tell me what you think. Did you go see Babygirl? Tell me in the comments down below. Bye.